We've decided to go in a different direction, he said, wearing that polished, rehearsed smile. You're valuable where you are, Katherine. But for now, we just don't think you're quite ready. He said it as if I should be grateful. Grateful to be overlooked. Grateful that after 5 years of building, solving, protecting, and anticipating, I'd been told to sit back down. And when he said it, he didn't even look me in the eye. But the moment that stayed with me wasn't the words. It was the smirk that followed. That sideways grin he gave as he gestured across the table, toward the man who was now taking the promotion I'd been working toward for 2.5 years. Congratulations, Dylan, he added, clapping him on the back. Like he'd just made a brilliant chess move. Like Dylan's victory wasn't just predictable, it was engineered. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And let us know in the comments. Have you ever been told you're not ready? My name is Katherine Dean. I'm a systems architect, or at least that's what my title says. What I really am is the fire extinguisher they only notice when the building's already on fire. I've worked for Clarion Dynamics for just over 5 years. I was recruited straight out of MIT, top of my class, highest security clearance by age 27. And I've been sitting in the same chair, same floor, same title ever since. Because I don't play golf with executives. Because I don't come from anyone important. Because I don't smile and nod when someone misuses tech terms in meetings. Dylan Mathers, on the other hand, he plays the game. He says synergy and scale like they're magic spells. He's the son of my boss's oldest friend. The kind of man who sends annual Christmas cards that are printed on heavy cream cardstock with gold foil lettering. And 3 months ago he joined our team as a strategic growth consultant. Now he was VP of Product Infrastructure. My position essentially, except with a better title, and a worse understanding of how our system worked. That meeting was supposed to be a formality. I had walked in ready to present a roadmap for re-architecting our load balancing structure. I had spent my weekend running simulations, identifying bottlenecks, and preparing fixes for a growing but quiet flaw in our resource handling logic. Nothing was crashing, yet. But under the hood, it was a mess. And I had found it. But the moment they announced Dylan's promotion, I felt something inside me shift. Not anger. Not pain. Just clarity. They wanted him to be the face of the system. Let him own it. So I closed my laptop quietly, slid the folder of analysis papers back into my bag, and when they asked if I had any thoughts, I simply said, if you think he's the right choice, then I support the team's decision. They smiled. I smiled back, and I walked out of the room, with a system flaw in my pocket, and no intention of sharing it. The thing about cracks in software is they don't scream. They whisper. They flicker in logs. They create latency. They build pressure. And then eventually they break. Over the next few days, I watched from my desk as Dylan strutted through his new role. He scheduled unnecessary meetings, talked about aligning core functionality with enterprise throughput, and clicked through dashboards he didn't know how to interpret. He had access to everything now, but context? None. He didn't notice that our East Coast servers were quietly dropping packet returns at 2 a.m. He didn't spot the memory leaks during data migration. He didn't know that 2 of our core dependencies had reached deprecation status last week. But I did. I always did. And for once, I kept my hands off the wheel. I watched it bend. And waited. A week later, the first client complaint came in. Not to Dylan. To me. A private message from a project manager I'd worked with for years. Hey, Katherine, is something going on with the content pipeline? Response times are weird. I told him I'd look into it. But not yet. Another week passed. 3 more complaints. 1 delayed release. And Dylan? He was smiling a little less now. On the 14th day, I came in early. I poured my coffee, opened the system logs, and leaned back in my chair, watching as the alert started stacking. Load spike on node 14. Content request timeout, 504. Session queue exceeded threshold. And then, at 9:47 a.m., I heard my name echo down the hallway. Katherine. Hey, can I borrow you for a sec? It was Dylan, his voice cracking at the edges. He looked pale. Panic in his eyes. He was holding his phone like a grenade. "We've got a situation. I know you're probably busy, but this thing with the servers, I mean, you always know how to fix this stuff, right?" I took a long sip of my coffee, set it down, and finally turned toward him. "Oh, now I'm ready." The thing about system failures is, they don't start with explosions. They start with delays, with unexplained lags, with moments that seem small, until they snowball. And Dylan? He didn't see any of it. After the meeting, I returned to my desk and pulled up the same dashboards I had closed 2 weeks earlier. The system flaw I had found was still there, still growing. And now it had friends. Error logs had tripled in volume. Queue bottlenecks were forming on the East Coast servers. Microservices meant to balance load were overlapping and triggering fallback routines. The system wasn't broken yet, but it was breathing smoke. And Dylan was too busy playing boss to smell it. He had replaced our structured stand-ups with vague, hour-long syncs full of buzzwords and whiteboard doodles. He pitched architecture ideas to the team that contradicted our infrastructure. He deleted alerts from the monitoring dashboard because they stressed him out. And I watched. Quietly. Efficiently. Like a surgeon waiting for the right organ to fail. The messages started coming in on day 4. "Hey Katherine, you noticing weird latency in the West node? The sync engine is hiccuping again, is it just me? Can you run eyes over Dylan's new load balancer patch? It's interesting." I responded politely. "I'll take a look when I get the chance." And I didn't. By day 6, users were beginning to feel it. The platform wasn't crashing, but it was dragging. Slow file uploads, timeouts on dashboards, blank pages with spinning loaders. It was the kind of issue that doesn't cause a PR disaster, just a slow erosion of trust, which in our industry was death by 1,000 milliseconds. Dylan started walking faster in the office. He stopped making eye contact with the senior devs. And in meetings he no longer said, "We've got it covered." Now he said, "We're exploring multiple avenues." Translation. He had no clue what he was doing. Our CTO hadn't noticed yet. Too busy fundraising. Too trusting of Dylan. Too blind to realize that the person who usually cleaned up messes was no longer mopping. Patrick, my manager, was even worse. He pulled me aside on day 7. "Hey Katherine, maybe ease up a little on Dylan. He's doing his best. It's a big role." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just nodded. "Sure. He'll figure it out." By the second week, our biggest client, Sirona Systems, issued a formal complaint. The kind that goes directly to the top. "We're experiencing serious latency on all North American endpoints. If this continues, we'll begin considering alternative solutions." I knew that would hit hard. Sirona brought in nearly 40% of our Q1 revenue. Losing them would be a wound our leadership couldn't ignore. That same afternoon, I watched Dylan pacing in the hallway. On his phone. Voice sharp, panicked, cutting through the glass like a saw. He walked into the server room alone. Stayed there 23 minutes. When he came out, his shirt was slightly untucked and his hands were shaking. At 6:45 p.m., just as I was packing up, I got a Slack ping. "Dylan. Hey Katherine. Got a sec? Think I need your eyes on something. Me heading out. Tomorrow." "Dylan. It's urgent. Patrick said you're probably the only one who can fix it." Me, funny. That's not what he said in the meeting. There was no reply, but 10 minutes later, an email arrived from Patrick. Subject: urgent, high-priority system issue. "Katherine, I know this isn't ideal timing, but Dylan's running into a major issue with the architecture. We need your expertise. Please let me know if you can jump on this tonight." I didn't reply. I sat at my desk and watched as the alerts continued to roll in. System alert sync failure. Timeout threshold breached. System alert session handling loop. Exceeded recursion limit. Client alert, Sirona dashboard failed to load. I leaned back in my chair and whispered. And so it begins. The next morning, I came in early, wore my navy blazer, brought my own coffee black, and I waited. At 8:21 a.m., Dylan came to my desk. No smirk, no swagger, just desperation. "Katherine, please. I need your help. I don't know what's happening. The platform's collapsing, and Sirona is threatening to pull their contract. I looked up, met his eyes, and said calmly, what happened to me not being ready? He swallowed hard. I was wrong. I nodded slowly, then stood. You want my help? Then we do it my way. They didn't knock the first time. They just walked over and took what was mine. The promotion, the recognition, the seat at the table. But when the walls started to crack, when the clients started to scream, when the dashboards began to flash like emergency strobes, suddenly they remembered my name. And this time they knocked. It was 8:21 a.m. when Dylan stood by my desk. His tie was crooked, his face pale, his mouth moving, but barely forming sentences. Katherine, I really need your help. The sync systems are breaking. We're losing data instances, there's a memory leak spreading through the content queue. And the server rooms, well, someone said they heard buzzing. That's not normal, right? I closed the folder in front of me, took one slow sip of coffee, then swiveled in my chair. It's not normal, I said. And I warned about it 2 weeks ago. He blinked. What? I had a proposal ready, right before the promotion meeting. Had a full fix scoped and documented. His lips parted, then closed again. It was almost sad. Almost. Why didn't you say something? He asked. I tilted my head. Because you were ready, I said flatly. Isn't that what they told me? That afternoon, Patrick called me in. He tried to sound calm, but his voice had that undercurrent. The kind people use when their power is slipping and they know it. Katherine, look. We all underestimated the situation. Dylan's learning fast, but this is bigger than anyone expected. He was sweating. I almost pitied him. We need you to lead a task force, he continued. We'll give you a dedicated team. Just get things under control. I let him speak, nodded in the right places. Then I smiled, not politely but deliberately. On one condition, I said. They blinked. Both Patrick and Dylan, sitting across from me like two schoolboys in trouble. I want full access reinstated. Root credentials. Engineering autonomy. Patrick hesitated. Of course. You'll get whatever you need. And I want it on the record, I added, that I'm leading the architecture audit and re-implementation, under CTO oversight, not Dylan's. That one stung. Dylan's ears turned red. But he said nothing. Anything else? Patrick asked, voice tight. Actually, yes, I said. All meetings are to be documented. Every decision, every revision. And I get the final say on deployment. They agreed. Because they had no choice. Sirona was preparing to pull out. We were days, maybe hours, away from a full-blown collapse. And the only person who could stop it was me. I returned to my desk with the new credentials in hand. Opened my laptop. Breathed in the code like air. The logs didn't scare me. The chaos didn't overwhelm me. It felt like coming home. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I rerouted traffic. Flushed corrupted cache pools. Restored deprecated dependencies with clean replacements. Within 4 hours, latency dropped by 63%. Within 6, we were stable. Sirona stayed. Clients stopped calling. The alerts stopped blinking. And for the first time in weeks, the office was silent. That night I didn't go home. I stayed late. Ran simulations. Not just to fix the mess, but to prove what I had known all along. That I had been ready. Long before they even realized there was a fire. At 11:42 p.m., I opened a new folder on my desktop. Named it Project Reclaim. Inside, I began collecting every document. Every meeting summary. Every time I was dismissed, ignored, overlooked. Every technical decision that had gone wrong under Dylan's watch. Every email where Patrick had told me to be patient. I wasn't building a case out of spite. I was building it out of principle. Because if they wanted me to save the company, then they were going to pay for every moment they made me invisible. Saving the system was never the hard part. I'd fixed more complex infrastructures in college. What made this different, what made it personal, was that I wasn't just patching broken code. I was rewriting a culture. one line of truth at a time. The day after I restored platform stability, there were no thank you emails. No flowers. No standing ovations. But there was something else. Fear. Dylan didn't walk past my desk anymore. Patrick no longer called me kiddo. And the engineers, the same ones who used to shrug when I spoke, now listened like their jobs depended on it. Because maybe they did. I'd asked for conditions. Now I enforced them. All tech meetings went through me. Documentation was mandatory. And I implemented a change tracking system that logged every decision made. And who made it? It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. And visibility. Two things I'd been denied for far too long. But not everyone liked the new order. On Tuesday, I found out Dylan had tried to secretly roll back one of my changes. A performance patch I had written to streamline session memory. He claimed it was accidental. A version control issue. But when I confronted him, he couldn't even look me in the eye. You still think you can win this? I asked. You think charm is enough to bury incompetence? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. Because deep down even he knew. The illusion was fading. Patrick tried to play peacekeeper. Let's not turn this into a power struggle, he said. You and Dylan are on the same team. I almost laughed. Instead I replied. That's not how he acted when I was passed over. He wanted the title. Let him wear the weight. Behind the scenes, I kept building my archive. Every rollback. Every denial. Every meeting where Dylan shrugged and said, I'll let Katherine explain. Oh, I explained. But I logged it too. Then came the audit request. It started with a whisper from HR. An anonymous ethics inquiry. Nothing serious yet. But I knew. This was the moment. The one I'd been preparing for. I sent an email to our CTO. Subject. Architecture breakdown. Summary report. Attached. A 12-page postmortem. A technical diagram of the flaw I had discovered 3 weeks before the outage. A timestamped timeline of Dylan's decisions. Screenshots of internal warnings I'd sent that had been ignored. And finally, my original proposal, unopened, from the week of the promotion meeting. He called me within the hour. Katherine, this is thorough. It's honest, I said. That's what you wanted, right? He was quiet. Then asked the one question that mattered. What do you want? I didn't hesitate. I want my title corrected. And I want Dylan removed from anything infrastructure related, permanently. By Thursday it was done. Official email from the CTO. Dylan reassigned to business operations. I was promoted to senior systems director. No ceremony. No party. Just a change in the org chart. And a new nameplate on the office door that used to be his. When I walked into the glass office for the first time, I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just closed the door, sat down, and opened my Project Reclaim folder. Because I wasn't done. Not yet. This wasn't just about a title. It was about telling every woman, every quiet genius, every overlooked expert. You don't have to yell to be powerful. But when they finally listen, make sure you own the room. Audits don't start with explosions. They begin with whispers. Calendar invites with vague titles. Questions like, can we review your access logs? Requests for clarification from people who've never spoken to you before. And in the case of Clarion Dynamics, they began with me. The moment I forwarded the Project Reclaim archive to the CTO, the machine started moving. Compliance officers scheduled touchpoints. Security leads began rechecking logs. HR asked for timestamps. And like a line of code under a debugger, the system began to reveal everything. Dylan was still in the office. But he'd become background noise. No more flashy meetings. No more leading calls. He was quietly reassigned to growth initiatives, a vague title that meant nothing and gave him no control. But what he didn't know, yet, was that I wasn't just finished getting my promotion. I was just getting started cleaning up the mess he'd left behind. The auditors arrived on Monday. 3 of them. All stone-faced, well-dressed, expressionless. They pulled logs, read through emails, and most importantly, they listened. I showed them everything. The timeline of when I discovered the system flaw. The email I had drafted to warn leadership, and never sent. the exact day Dylan rolled out his performance patch that introduced new security risks. How I had been excluded from meetings directly related to the flaw I had already diagnosed. One of them leaned forward halfway through my walkthrough. "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" I met his gaze. "I was told I wasn't ready." Meanwhile, Dylan was sweating. He tried to get ahead of the story, started slipping into conversations with other teams, blaming technical legacy issues, calling the audit routine. But I'd already submitted his rollback history, the overwritten patch files, the admin logs that showed he attempted to erase diagnostic data right before the system crash. Every move he made to cover his tracks, I had already anticipated. By the end of the week, the findings were compiled. Critical infrastructure decisions were made by individuals without proper technical oversight. Internal warnings were ignored. Systemic communication gaps contributed to near-catastrophic client loss. Proper solutions had been documented, but dismissed. No names were listed publicly, but everyone inside the company knew exactly who the individuals were. Patrick tried to reach out, sent me a message. "Glad things are back on track. Appreciate all your help." I didn't reply, because the audit hadn't just uncovered Dylan's incompetence. It had exposed Patrick's negligence, his favoritism, his refusal to listen. And that was something I was no longer willing to ignore. I drafted a report of my own, not to the CTO, but to the board. It detailed how systemic bias had led to costly decisions, how technical credibility had been replaced by connections, and how the company could never scale if it didn't recognize the value of earned expertise over inherited privilege. It wasn't bitter. It was tactical, professional, unemotional. And at the end, I added one final line. Had I spoken sooner, I could have saved us weeks of loss. But I had been taught, by repeated example, that silence was safer than speaking truth. 2 weeks later, the board announced a strategic leadership restructuring. Patrick was moved into a consulting role. Voluntarily, they said. But we all knew what that meant. And Dylan? Gone. Quietly. No goodbye party. No farewell email. Just an empty desk. And a legacy no one would ever admit to. The morning after the announcement, I arrived early. Sat in the glass office, now my office. Opened my laptop. And began drafting a new team charter. One built on accountability. One that listed expertise first. Not bloodlines. And at the top of the document, in bold letters, I wrote, "Everyone gets a voice, not just a title." "You're not ready," he once told me. Now he was gone, and they were offering me the role he said I could never handle. The email came on a Thursday morning. No subject line, just a calendar invite titled, "Leadership Discussion, Confidential." I clicked it. 1 hour with the CTO, 2 board members, and the VP of Finance. The kind of meeting you don't get invited to unless something is about to change. Permanently. I didn't panic. Didn't rush to prepare slides. I just sat back, took a breath, and opened the Project Reclaim folder one last time. Everything I needed was already there. The conference room was all glass and chrome. Polished, clean, formal. But I didn't feel out of place anymore. Not like before. I took my seat at the head of the table. This time no one questioned it. The CTO started the conversation. "Katherine, the board's been reviewing everything from the audit, and your response to it." I nodded. Waited. "We're impressed. You've not only stabilized the system, you've rebuilt trust across engineering and product. The team trusts you. So do our clients." Then came the offer. "We'd like to formally offer you the role of Chief Technology Officer. Effective immediately." I didn't smile. Not yet. I thought back to that day in the meeting room. The one where they gave Dylan the title. The one where they told me I wasn't quite ready. And now they were offering me the very position above it. The one Dylan never even reached. I looked them in the eye and said, "I accept, with one condition." They exchanged glances. "We're listening. No more promotions based on relationships. No more shortcuts. From now on, leadership must be earned, documented, measurable, reviewed. No exceptions." They agreed. And with that, it was done. I walked back to my office. But this time, I didn't stop at my desk. I walked to Dylan's old corner, the one with the skyline view, and placed my laptop on the glass table. This was mine now. Not because I demanded it, but because I designed it. Piece by piece, failure by failure, until the structure they ignored became the foundation they needed. 2 weeks later, I hosted my first all-hands meeting as CTO. I stood in front of the entire company, not just to speak, but to redefine how leadership would work moving forward. I didn't give a speech. I told them a story about the time someone said I wasn't ready, and how I watched their version of leadership fall apart. Quietly, precisely, until there was nothing left but truth. Now I lead a team that listens, a company that doesn't reward volume over value, and a culture where no one, ever again, has to stay silent to stay safe.